My name's Gavin Smith. I'm one of the 6 members of, how do you say that? I'm one of the members. There are 6 others, 5 others of the selection committee for new directors. I'll learn to count eventually, one day. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon with you. You're about to see a really extraordinary, kind of unclassifiable film. You've never seen a film like it, and it's a real vision, and a really fun film. And I think we're going to have a really fun Q&A afterwards with the director, but he's here right now to make an introduction. Please give a warm welcome to Terence Nance.
How y'all doing? So, thank you for coming. Everybody who worked on the film, please stand up. Everybody give him a hand. This movie took like 2,000 years to make, and I'm not lying. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without you all, but also without the city. And I just wanted to thank New Directors, New Films, and the Film Society and MoMA for giving me the platform to showcase my work. I really didn't think that the film would be on this platform or on any of the platforms that it's on, and so dynamic in that space. And the opportunities continue to blow me away. So to be among the other films that play here is really an honor. So I'd like to say thank you for that. And I hope you guys enjoy the film. It's really weird. So thank you for coming.
That ending caught me out. Please welcome back Terence Nance. I probably need to see this film another 3 or 4 times before I feel like I'll be able to have a fair conversation with you. But so maybe you can help us dummies and just try to tell us, where did this movie come from? How did the inspiration for it come about? And take us through how it evolved.
It's the biggest question of all time. Oh man, how did it evolve? It happened because of her and my relationship with her, and wanting to make something that was a consecration of a situation that I thought was beautiful, but it was still really ugly at the same time. And I think that in the process of doing that, in the process of consecrating this very personal thing, I wanted to also explore a lot of different ways of making cinema and making moving images and articulating emotion on screen that I hadn't necessarily seen put together all in one film, that maybe had been used sparingly in different, places, but I'm kind of trying to put them all together in a way that is narrative.
I mean, the film kind of mutates repeatedly into many different forms, many different types of animation, many different types of photography. But pretty much all the way through it remains what I guess I would have to call a documentary.
Really?
Well, is any of it made up?
Well, I guess to your original point, it being a documentary, it doesn't necessarily document. I think in the strictest sense, because some of the stuff I didn't have a camera when it was happening, so.
Well, let's say it's nonfiction then.
Yeah, it is mostly nonfiction, but a lot of stuff is not made up, but it's a summary of maybe several things that happened over months, and I had to kind of sum it up in a scene or something like that, or in a shot. So, I mean, I think it's emotionally nonfiction, but it's not factually nonfiction just because of the fact that it needed to be a movie. It needed to be a certain length.
Where is Namik now?
Like in Harlem somewhere, but she'll be here on Monday for the Q&A. She couldn't make today. I'm sorry. I apologize for her, but yeah, she wishes she could be here. and she's been at most of the festivals, and so yeah, she's
And
around.
is she working on her answer film?
I don't know. I don't think she is, but maybe she is. She did some answering. I mean, the trailer exists, but it's definitely not complete. Somebody asked her that in another Q&A, and she said it was the biggest missed opportunity of all time. So I think that maybe she'll pick it back up.
I said in the introduction that I thought the film was kind of unclassifiable and that it was kind of, there was no other film like it, but I wondered if you did have any other kind of models that inspired you, whether they're filmic or in some other medium.
The main reference is the blues, because I didn't really know how to write a movie at the time. I didn't know what a script format was or anything, so I wrote when I started the short film. So it's written in like a verse, chorus. Let's say this is the verse, and then the chorus is, and how would you feel? So, and also the nature of the blues, like as a concept to me, is a consecration of a negative experience to make something beautiful. So, in general, and I use like some Lead Belly in there, and I use who's actually pre-blues, but I also use some Robert Johnson to kind of push that reference. But cinematically, I think Jorgen Luth, The Perfect Human, was kind of an influence. What else?
Not a well-known film.
No. I thought it was, though. I thought people knew about it, but whenever people are like, what is that? So, yeah, check it out. I think it's probably online somewhere. But, yeah, those Amelie, Junet in general, just kind of like the children's book element, or kind of trying to break something down that's complicated into its simplest, most factual form, but also in the language, but in the images and in how it's put together, it becomes extremely complex and intricate. So yeah, those are my main movie references.
I sort of get a sense as well of, as the film unfolds and keeps unfolding and unfolding, and also kind of going inwards and inwards, that you're kind of trying to like test the audience breaking point. At what point are they going to start tearing their hair out and say, I can't take it anymore?
Yeah, that's how the relationship was, I mean, it really, that's a metaphor for kind of the nature of the relationship. Like, you're going to stay because it's pretty. But at the same time, it tests your endurance emotionally and, narratively, and just complexity-wise. Definitely complexity-wise, it pushes your
Yeah,
endurance.
I mean, your mind can't wander away for 5 seconds. Otherwise, you kind of immediately lose the thread and you're playing catch up. Well, let's see. You've got a big audience here. I think they probably have a lot of questions, so let's start taking questions from them. Yeah, all the way in the back.
Of course. So to the to the first question, no, we're friends. And to the second, can you repeat that? Because it was. Is that Himda? Who's that? Probably. Well, speaking for myself, I can't speak for her, but I think that there is something about not taking a chance, or maybe whatever, if that line represents kind of a point of no return of, saying I love you or making like a very decisive move. I think a lot of people don't cross it because if you do, then there's a definitive answer and thus no hope, So if there's a no, if you have somebody to marry you and they say no, it's pretty much you're done. You know what I mean? So you kind of like maybe would never say it just because you want the possibility of that marriage to exist. No problem.
Yeah. question was, Terence has departed and broken so many conventions of conventional narrative film, and in your next project, and we trust there is one, will you continue to kind of to break those forms, or will it maybe move back towards a more conventional narrative?
I think, I mean, I will continue to try and break form, especially just in the way that the post-production, like in the way it's put together. This breaks form in terms of it's referencing an experience that I had. I'm probably not going to do that too much anymore, or if ever. You know, never say never, but my next project is not something that happened to me directly, if that's your question. But in general, in how it's put together and how it's written and how it's executed in terms of the mix of styles and the surrealism and the documentary-esque footage, I will continue to, you know, work those things in.
Yeah.
I have a two-part question. First, what is your favorite flavor of lollipop? Second, what did you learn about love from the film, and do you think you're in a better position to understand love and find a relationship that will last you the rest of your life?
Two-part question. The serious part of the question is what flavor of lollipop does Terence like, and the less serious part was what has he learned about love and the nature of love from making this film?
I have a disappointing answer to the first one because I haven't probably had a lollipop since that day. 'Cause I just don't. I'm not a candy. I don't eat candy really. But for the just for that, we kind of did that. I would say probably pineapple if they have that. Do they have that? I like pineapples. I didn't learn anything from the movie in terms of love. I mean, I say that specifically because the movie, I learned from the experience, you know, and I learned who I am and how I interact with my emotions generally from just the fact that I have the evidence that I will, I guess, investigate and interrogate my emotions to no end, because they're like, I understand because of how intensely important they are to me or something like that, or how intensely felt they are. So I understand the size of my emotions generally, but I think what I learned was all just from, you know, messing up so royally in the actual experience.
Yes. The question was, Terence began with the short originally, and what made him then take that to the next level and expand it into what we saw today?
Well, it was a very long short. It was like 45 minutes. So it was kind of like in no man's land of short filmmaking. And in watching it, the story, the short was fictional. It was presented completely as fiction. And it felt very divided from the actual experience. And I think my whole inspiration for even making it was very much so to put audiences through, put people through what I went through, but in kind of an hour and a half. And it just didn't achieve that in its scope, but specifically in its scope in that it was completely fictional or presented as completely fiction. So, you know, when you're done with something, you kind of have to try and move on to the next thing and send it out to people as evidence of what you can do to get the next thing done. So I was watching it a lot, and I realized that and decided to expand it.
Did it have any animation in it, or was the animation the thing that kind of arrived subsequently when you started to build it out?
Yeah, and the animation is specifically to illustrate moments that could not have been reenacted. Like, for instance, I had a dream, and that you know, that's illustrated with animation, or I wrote a letter and read it, or she wrote a letter. So these things are very important to the nature of the narrative, that you can't just put a camera in front of, or it would be just boring to watch her read a letter. Or not even boring, but just it would be inaccurate to what was actually happening, to just show the letter. And that's how the animation kind of got built in.
Yeah, in the back.
You gonna repeat that? Are you good?
No, I never want her.
All right, everybody heard that? Nah, she's good. You know, she's in a real good. Nah, I mean he's he's a cool. He's real secure, and you know, he's yeah, it's all
He's not
great.
working on his own film about you.
No, no. I mean, me and Namik's relationship is very much. I mean, even in the context, this is just one thing we've done together. We've done other films, and we're working on a short film now, and our relationship is continuous and based on making artwork. And he came along in that context, so I don't think it was like it got sprung on him in that way. He was kind of prepared for it, and you know, he's a really cool, lovable, nice guy. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah, just to repeat that, the movie was obviously made over a long period of time, and how was Terence able to stay true to the original impulse, the original emotions, as time passed, and those emotions, I guess, presumably evolved?
That's kind of what that section, emotional memory, is about. I did start to forget. I guess stay true maybe isn't the right word in terms of how I was experiencing the emotions, but understood or that they were accurate. I was feeling them accurately as they were felt at the moment that I'm articulating on screen. And that wasn't really a problem, but I completely forgot what happened exactly. Like, so there's like a lot of the complexity or confusion element of the film is to reflect that. And I speak on that in the emotional memory part, that it's very difficult to remember what happened after a long period of time, but at least for me, it was not difficult at all to rehash or re-experience how it actually felt, you know, how the great things about it and the heartache. Like I remember this was the first time I understood, it's really cheesy, this is the cheesiest thing of all time, but I didn't know really that the word heartache spoke to a real aching of this part of your body. It like actually happened, and I was like, oh, that's actually, the word actually means something that actually happens. And so it's something that, you know, I could always recall because it was so intense, and it was this whole thing was kind of like a virgin experience. You know, it was the first time it happened.
Yes. Do you have different emotions when you watch the film now to when you were editing it, or each time you watch it?
The different emotions about the work or about her and all of the people in the film.
The experience of the film or the experience of the relationship?
They are. You're right.
They're intertwined.
Well, I guess for me, I'll try and divide it to answer. So I definitely re-experienced the emotions of the relationships, and I think that just reflects how I am. Like my personality is to like never to hold on to everything, and you know, this is maybe a tool that I probably subconsciously created to make that easier or something like that. In terms of the work, it's just difficult because, you know, it's your first movie and it's your first baby and it has all these flaws that you want to change, and you want to change them now, and it's like, all right, stop the movie, everybody leave, let me redo this part, you know what I mean? So, you know, that's very different because that's a very kind of negative emotion that I'm always re-experiencing, of this like, oh man, I should have done that differently. But I guess that also reflects that there's a lot of things in there that I messed up on. I obviously should have done differently, but I've kind of reconciled those things, you know, a while ago.
Were there any things during the making, particularly during the editing of it, that you were really trying to take care to avoid? The thing that comes to mind to me is that it would be easy for somebody to maybe, if the film were a little different, it would be easy for somebody to slap a label on it and say, oh, it's kind of therapy art. But you avoid all of the kind of the kind of therapy language, therapeutic language, self-help kind of language. There's almost no trace of it in the film, and that therefore kind of keeps that at bay. Were there any aspects along those lines that you were really careful to stay away from?
Yeah, I don't know. It was like if it was a means to an end in that way, or it avoids those things because I had a few rules. One of them was that in the narration, it couldn't speak directly about an emotion, like you felt bad or you felt this way. It was all facts, and it was like kind of a barrage of facts. Anything else that was communicated in terms of the emotions had to be in the images and how the images were executed. And I think that that kind of keeps it above itself emotionally or something like that, or like detached.
Doesn't become sentimental.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a kind of, that was, I guess, me trying to articulate how me as a male, not a man, but a male, is expected to process these types of narratives in their life. And it's like, it just happened. That's what happened. You know what I mean? And there's no investigation or analysis of, you know, what it's doing to you emotionally. And compartmentalizing those things is kind of like my way of articulating that.
Yes. The emotional footprint of a relationship is a very private thing, but in this case, you're kind of letting it all hang out. Do you feel, what's your comfort level with that, and are you concerned about what the consequences might be for some future relationship?
I guess I disagree that it's private, because if you're gonna be with somebody, you gotta tell them all that stuff anyway. So I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, come on, you gotta tell them. I feel like, you know, everybody goes through that interview process of like, how did you get here, single? You know what I mean? So I guess this is, you know, an easier way to articulate my past than having to say it, because at least it doesn't change, and I can't be caught in some sort of like, but I don't necessarily. I mean, for me, I don't experience that information as quote unquote private, and I don't have any apprehension about people knowing it, and I don't know why I don't, but I do think that's weird, maybe.
So if you met someone and they were really into you and they wanted to date you, would you maybe just give them the DVD and say, call me afterwards?
No, I would not. I would not do that.
Oh, and on the DVD, you're going to do a commentary as well?
No, that would be, that's hilarious.
I think you should.
No, I want her to, I mean, also her doing one would be weird too.
Oh, yeah, that's even better, yeah. Yes. Yeah, you, in the Galactica t-shirt. Why did Terence choose to use two narrators?
Many, many reasons. One is kind of like the pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner thing. And I feel like if I was narrating the whole thing, it would be impossible for it to feel detached emotionally, like I was saying, and for it to feel like that's actually what happened. Those are actually the facts. So there's sort of like a third-party narrator gives some sort of validity to, or truth to what you're hearing, as opposed to if you know it's me talking, it's like, I don't know, that's just, he just did it. There's also sort of like, and I kind of realized this after, there's the me who wrote the film is a me who already went through the experience and knows things that the me on screen doesn't know. So it's two different me's, and one is like the older, I mean, even if it's hours older, the older, wiser person. So I kind of wanted to articulate that dynamic. But sometimes when the narration gets very specific to Terence, as opposed to like a more ubiquitous experience with love, then I felt it necessary for it to be my voice, because it just colors it a little bit differently in terms of how it lands on the audience.
Yes. question was, could Terence talk a little bit more about how the blues informs his kind of creative practice? I guess adding to what you said earlier on in this conversation.
Yeah, and I'd add to that list August Wilson, who extensively talks about the blues as an inspiration for articulating kind of the experiences in Pittsburgh that he was articulating through his template cycle. And I'm kind of in that canon, in that, I mean, that's stupid, obviously not as good as August Wilson, but you know, I'm referencing that idea of taking the blues, which to me at its heart is it's pulling on some, you know, the mess, you know, the whatever is terrible and kind of the ashes of a situation, and sculpting it into something that made the ashes worthwhile. You know, not only just a retelling of the fire and like this terrible thing that happened, but in the making of it, in its execution, making it as beautiful and enchanting as possible. Because I guess on some level, the full circle of that, because that thing, the fire wouldn't have happened unless, you know, you were really engaged with it. You know, you wouldn't have messed up unless you were there for it. So I'm kind of like using, to me, what's at the heart of the blues is just making, you know, lemonade out of lemons. And I think that that's kind of the central idea, not necessarily how it sounds maybe, or how, you know, anything else, but just the central concept of it, if that's what you're asking for.
Yes. Sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't. How does longing feed your creativity?
I don't know that it does. I mean, I think that I think I think making things distracts me from that feeling. You know, so it's like a way of distracting myself until I have enough literal, like, time-wise distance from it for it to feel, you know, low volume enough to be, I don't know, what's the word? Like, I can experience it and not die, you know? It's like, so it's just like a way of dealing with it by just distracting me from it. Being creative or using it is just distracting me from the actual emotion.
We're nearly out of time, but I'll take one more question and then we'll have to go. Yes. Yep. There's a question about the animator and how much creative license he was given, he or she.
It varied a lot. The animation was by far the most difficult part because, you know, having no money and it being an extremely labor-intensive thing, my first idea was that I would get an animator for each section. You know, some of them are as long as 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, and some of them are like 5 to 10 seconds. So I broke them down. I think there's 14 sections, and I just started contacting people online who I liked their work and attempting to kind of build relationships with them and work with them. And mostly that just didn't work. It worked for about 5% of the section, 10% of the sections, where somebody actually kind of completed something. But mostly it was kind of like a lot of false starts or kind of incomplete things. So I ended up just doing a lot of the pre-production of the animation myself, doing mostly concept art, character designs, storyboards, layout frames, things like that, and either working with interns to kind of do the more labor-intensive parts of the coloring of each frame or the in-betweens, or doing some of it myself. And so it kind of morphed into a factory atmosphere at our office space at Mokata.
Sweatshop or factory?
Definitely factory, you know. I mean, sweatshop for me, but it was a factory for everybody else because I was in there sleeping.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we're out of time, but he'll be in the lobby. Maybe you can ask him some more questions. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks, Terence.